Hi, I'm Tom. I have decided to create a Thrive Time video to walk you through a few things in Excel which I think will be really helpful. I think Excel is marvellous, and I think that Excel has the power to help us make complicated decisions really quickly, or present complicated things really simply. So this video is going to be in two parts. The first part is going to be seeing how we can use it really quickly with our class mark sheets to make simple jobs or complicated jobs much faster. The second thing is going to be looking at something like this. So this is my ultimate example of getting Excel to do lots of thinking so that you do very little work. It's good for department, it's good for middle leader level data management, but also if you use data a lot with your classes. It's pulling out students who are doing really well or not so well, pulling out students who have improved a lot, who have dropped a lot, just in terms of grades and things. It's telling me about what the outlook is like in relation to targets across a number of classes, and it will adapt using these little sliders. So this is telling me just for like specific classes how things are going. It's telling me how things are in terms of pupil premium, what the outlook's like for SEND students and boys versus girls. In this bit down the bottom here is telling me in specific topics how well everyone's getting on. So the first thing that you're going to need is a mark sheet for a class. What I've got here is a whole bunch of data, and at the moment this is not very useful at all. It's a realistic data set. The marks that I've put in are realistic for the ability of the kinds of students we have. It's got realistic data in terms of pupil premium, SEND students. The names I've anonymised to names of the starting list of the Tour de France. Another thing that will make this particularly useful is if you've not just got one assessment, you've got two assessments in there. Ideally, these are two assessments that you can compare to each other. Let me show you what a lot of this is going to work on the basis of. When we're looking at a big body of numbers like this, it's really difficult to look at just this big bank of numbers and find the biggest number. That's a really difficult thing to do. Adding some conditional formatting in here, my brain finds it much easier to look for the greenest thing than it does for just the biggest number. That principle is something that we're going to use time and time again as we go through. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to add filters. So I'm going to select the whole top row. I'm going to select the one on the left, I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to click to the one on the end. I'm going to go into sort and filter at the top right, and this is in the home tab, and I'm going to add filters. These little boxes appear here. What I can do is I can click on one of these little boxes, and I've got a whole variety of options. Normally I'm looking for things like, okay, let's have a look at the students who scored the highest. So we've got our 57 marker here, Wout Poels, and vice versa if I want to go smallest to largest. So Simon Bevilacqua is at the bottom. We have this problem where when I scroll down, now I've got this enormous data set, I don't know what all of these columns mean. So what I can do is I can freeze the top row. So either you can go into view and then freeze panes and click freeze top row, and what that means is that as I scroll down now, that top row stays there. So with a large data set, it makes things much easier. I can also freeze the first column, and what this does is it keeps the names on the left hand side. So if I am zoomed in, or I've got a really long spreadsheet and I need to go to the right hand side and deal with some stuff over here, the names stay on the left hand side, so I can still see who this applies to. Another problem that I often have is that when I have downloaded a mark sheet from Sims, it will often come out where you've got the last name and then the first name. Sometimes you've even got the truth group in there, and that's not particularly helpful to look through because I don't know all of my students' surnames the way I know their first names. I find it much easier to find something in a spreadsheet if I have sorted it A to Z and I'm looking for someone called Chris. Excel makes this quite easy to create extra columns like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a new column here by clicking next to where I want the new column, and then I can right click and I can insert, or you press Control and the plus key. Okay, new column, and I'm just going to call this first name. And what I do is at the top of the first column, I start going and doing it manually. This guy's name is Adam, this guy's name is Alberto, and you can see that Excel wants to auto-complete it for me because it's picked out that I'm typing in first name. Now, if I was fast enough, I can press down and enter and it will complete it for me. But if I'm not fast enough, which I'm often not, if you go into the cell underneath and you hit Control and then E, so you hold Control, press E, and there we go, it's filled it all in for us. Super helpful. Let's say, for example, you're not just going for for first names, you're going for surnames. So you add that in as well. It should, yeah, so it started to update it for me. It won't always be perfect. You can see it's not. But if you go and look for where it's not done it 100% correctly and then go through, it will start to get closer and closer and closer. Okay, so it's actually got DeMarchi in there. So you're looking for particularly for guys who have like double-barreled names, or they've got 2 surnames, things like that. So Yul Jensen's in there, De La Cruz is in there. Okay, so I think that's probably okay. I've got all these numbers: number, fractions, algebra, percentage, statistics, and shape. These are our marks that we've got for particular sections of the test. I need to make sure that everything is highlighted. You can hold just the cursor button and highlight everything. You can also hold shift and it will go from where you click first to where you click second, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Actually, it's taking too long, so I'm going to show you something else. Often when I'm dealing with a large data set, I will click not the first row of data, I'm going to click the second row of data and one in from the left and click freeze pane. And what this allows me to do is it keeps the top row frozen and the first row of data, and it keeps the left hand column frozen. This is dealing with the top row to here and then to here, and there's not so much scrolling going through. Now, if you go to home and this bit conditional formatting here, within here there is lots of ready-made stuff that makes things so much faster. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into color scales, and this button here, if I click this, it's going to change everything so that it's colored based on the value that's inside. And if you look at the button itself, it's green at the top and it's red at the bottom. And what that means is big numbers are green, bottom numbers are red. So that works really, really nicely. And now it's really easy to see students. So for example, this student here, I can see straight away has done quite well at the end of the paper because they're more green. Down here, this student here, Omar Frail, hasn't done so well. I can see really quickly that he's looking quite red. So those are some reasonably basic things that I think will make a massive difference. If we're just going from a spreadsheet that is no formatting whatsoever to just a little bit of color and the ability to filter, that will make a massive, massive difference to how quickly you can use it. Other things then, a slightly more intermediate level. Let's say, for example, I've plonked in all of my marks and I don't want to have to add them up. I might as well be writing it handwritten. So in this total score here, I'm adding up all of these values. And the formula that I use for that is sum. So anytime you're writing a formula, press equals first and then sum, S-U-M. The first thing that you're going to need to do to start this formula is add in a bracket. You can hit tab as well and it will do the same thing. Sum, I just need to tell it cells to add up. So if I click a cell or I write in a cell, I find it easier to click. It's just a bit faster. Making sure that it's in the right row as well. And then comma to separate the values that I want, and then another cell, and then comma, and then another cell. Or to make it faster if the cells are close together, I click the left-hand one, I hold down shift, and I click the far right-hand one, and it picks all the cells that are close together. If I just leave it like that and hit return, Excel will finish it off for me. It's taking me to the cell below. If I go back in, it's showing me where it's applied. Now, the problem is that if I've just done one cell, I now need to quickly do all the others. So this is where being scrolled down right to the bottom works really well with a big data set. This, you can see in the bottom right hand corner, there's a little square of the cell. And if I click and hold once it turns into this black cross and then drag down, what it's going to do is it's going to drag the formula down at the same time. So it's best to start at the top formula and then work your way down. There you go. For every single cell, it's adding up that particular row. And Excel is clever enough to move, they're called relative references. So it knows that, yes, it's adding up these ones on this row. Actually, it knows that in this row, it's going to need to add up these scores, and it will automatically move down as you copy down the formula. The next thing is to work out an average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a column here. So equals again, average, and I like to use average A. And what this is asking me to do is very like sum, I just have to put in the values that it's going to create an average from. So I'm going to create an average just from these values here, and I've clicked and dragged across. And I can hit return again. I should close the bracket, but Excel will do it for me. And it's created me a mean average for this. What's really useful about if I do average A, if I've got something in there that doesn't have any data, if you think about mean averages, a mean average, you worry that it would add them all together and divide by 6, but this has realized that the data is empty in these two cells, and so it will actually only divide by 4. Next thing I'm going to show you is how to rank students. So I'm going to keep this near the total score because it's quite related to that. I've just added a new column and I hit equals rank, and I like to use RANK.EQ for the same reason that if there is a cell of the numbers that I'm trying to rank that's empty, it will just ignore it. So I'm going to tab into this one, and it's sorted it out for me at the top, and there are 3 things that I now need to put in. So the first thing is, what's the individual thing that I want to know the rank of? So I'm doing Adam Yates's column, and it's his rank in the year group in terms of his total score. So that's the first thing I need to put in, and it just needs to be 1 cell. And then the reference here is, where is the rest of the data? So it's 41, and then where are all the other marks? So I need to include him, so I'm going to start by clicking on him, and then I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, holding down Shift, and I click, and it's given me the whole range of all those scores. And when I'm not going to do something here, I'll show you why in a second. And then I want it to be in descending, so it's going to be 0, so it's going to rank them from the best one is going to be number 1, and the worst one is going to be number 180. Close the brackets, hit enter. So Adam is the 43rd person in this particular test that we've done. But there's one thing that's really important when you're doing something like this, and that's that as I'm going down, if I click into the formula again, what you notice is that Excel is doing that thing where it's trying to be really clever, and it's moving the reference down as you copy the formula down. But we don't want that, because it's now starting to include cells at the bottom we don't need, and it's not including cells at the top. So what I need to do is, in here, I need to insert $signs. So I'm going to go up to the top one where the formula is correct, and I insert $signs in front of the letter, in front of the number, and here in front of the letter, in front of the number. And that makes that what we call an absolute reference. So it won't change it when I copy the formula from one place to another. So if I just click into here, and I copy down to the same place. So the numbers are slightly different, because when I click in here, it's still moving down the individual cell it's trying to rank, but it's keeping the cells it's ranking from the same. There is a shortcut to doing this. So if I do exactly the same thing again, and I reselect my range that I'm ranking, and here I'm holding Control, Shift, and down, Excel will take me automatically to the bottom of where the data is. And what I can do here is press F4, and that automatically inserts an absolute reference where I have just made my selection. And just like I've done selecting right down to the bottom, if I actually, instead of dragging, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click when I can get the box to go to black cross, and it will now automatically go down to the very bottom of the spreadsheet and copy that all the way down to where there is data. And this time I'm going to use the red to green, and you can already see that high numbers, so people who are ranked right at the top, they haven't done particularly well, and people who are green have done really well. And if I go back to show you what it would look like if we just look at Mr. Lennon's class, so here you can see the kids who have not done well immediately popping up. What I want to do is, in my spreadsheet, I want to see the kids who are pupil premium on my spreadsheet, and I want that to be nice and clear for me. So if I have a look for a pupil premium student, so Domenico Pozzovivo is pupil premium, he's got a yes here. I'm actually going to click on his name. New rule, use a formula to determine which cells to format, and I'm going to say if this cell here is equal to Y, and I've put the quotes around it because what that's telling Excel is if the value inside this cell is Y. It's created an absolute reference. I don't want it to be an absolute reference because I want to be able to copy this around, and for Cyril Bartz to be looking at this cell here. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to change the formatting so that it's going to go a kind of light blue color, his name, if he is pupil premium. Okay, so he's gone light blue, and what I now want to do is say which cells this applies to. So it's going to start with Adam Yates, and it's going to go all the way down to Bernard at the bottom, and I'm going to hit apply. Now what I could have done, probably should have selected all of them first and then applied the conditional formatting. So you can see that Tom Dumoulin, and now it becomes really easy to spot my pupil premium kids. Obviously this spreadsheet now becomes something that I cannot show my class, so please do bear that in mind if that's the case. You can turn these things off just by going in and deleting them, or you could temporarily remove the formatting, go in, change the formatting. If you don't want to have to reprogram it, change it to white and go from there. But now you can do the same thing if they're SEN, go through and mark all the ones that are K, all the ones that are E, so that actually they appear on your class list. You want to count how many times something in particular has happened. Or if you want to, for example, as a middle leader, look at how many boys and how many girls, how many 6s you've got, how many students scored 7 in this. So normally this is something that would be included in a separate table. I'm just going to do it under here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to count the number of boys. So I'm going to count the number of people who've got an M in this column and the number of people who've got an F. And what we're going to do is we are going to insert the COUNTIF function. So it's going to say, okay, count up the number of values if they meet this criteria, if they are an M. So the first thing I need to do is I need to click the range. So that's going to be from the top right down to the bottom of this column here, and then the criteria. So just like with our conditional formatting for Pupil Premium, I'm looking for all the ones that contain the word M, that the value of that cell is M, and that's it. So I hit return. There are 87 boys in there. Now I have to be careful, because if I copy this down straight away, not only is it going to still be counting the M's, but it's going to start to move down one cell. So I need to make this an absolute reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm pressing F4, turn these both into absolute references, so that as I copy it down, it's keeping that same G2 to G8 180. I've copied it down rather than writing it again, just so I don't have to write the whole thing. I'm going to change M to F, and you can see there are 92 girls. Another way that you can do this is you can actually, instead of having to write every time what the value is, let's say you want to count the number of students who've got particular grades. You've got grade 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we're going to count the students in, this is the grade for this test, make that an absolute reference. And I want to do the ones whose value is the same as this cell on the left. So it's counted the number of people in this column who've got a grade 9. And if I copy this down, what it's doing is it copies down at the same time. So it's now counting the number of 7s. It's now counting the number of 4s. So that's a really good way of getting a big picture of how people have done very quickly. Now that we started to get into using formulas and things like that, when you start having cells that look like this, if I come back to this and let's say it's got a number of different formula in here, we're going to struggle to remember what things are. At least you will if you're me. One of the things that really helps is you can start naming things. It just makes things a little bit easier to work out what's going on. And there are multiple ways that you can do this. The fastest way I find is to turn your data into a table. And that's a ridiculous thing to do. In Excel, a table is a very specific thing. So I need to select what I consider to be my table. I need to make sure the whole thing is selected, nothing more, nothing less. And I go to insert table. And what that's saying there is that's just the locations that I've selected. And I hit return. Change the formatting ever so slightly. It's kept in all of my conditional formatting that I've put in. It's just added things to differentiate between some rows. Now this is really helpful, because if I go in and let's say, for example, I want to do the same thing and I say the range is going to be these guys here. Now, if you click the header, it's going to click the whole row down to infinity. If you click top here, it's just going to click individual cells. And you click on this join between the spreadsheet itself and the header. It selects just the data underneath the header. And you can see that actually it said table 2. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to rename the table. Table design, and I'm going to call this autumn 1 Marksheet. So if I go in here, I'm going to reselect the range, click in the middle, the join. So it's given me autumn 1 Marksheet, so it's telling me which table it's in, and autumn 1 grade. It's automatically given me the heading title, which means that it's much easier for me. The more I play around with this data, the more I'm going to recognize names like that. I need to set the criteria. So again, I'm going to say when it's equal to this one here. Now I could rename this table here to be grades, insert table, and I'm going to call this grade count. And this is the grade, and this is the count. So grade, and there you are. And so what this means is like that specific cell. Now there's a table, actually absolute references aren't a problem. Just pop that in and that formula is copied down. So you can see it appears the same in each one. So another thing that's particularly useful is, I've got a lot of data here. It's data for a whole year group. It's all of their data. I don't need all of it all the time. I just need some of it. For example, I'm not particularly interested in all of this data at the moment. I'm just focusing on the mark and kind of the overall outlook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the columns here, and I'm going to go into data and group. When I click group, this bar at the top appears here. And if I press minus, it shrinks it down. Now, what it's doing is it's hiding it. So often it's useful to have like a holder column. So if I grow that back out and I insert a column here, and I'm just going to call this Sims data and fold that down, I often color this in a particular color just to show that it's a holder column. And then I'll make sure that all of my holder columns are that color. So now if I put in here and I call this historical data, I can also copy over the formatting. If I highlight that whole column, Control C to copy, but instead of just doing Control V, I'm going to right click and go to formatting. It's just going to copy over the formatting. This stuff here I'm going to group, and then I'm going to add another one in, which is going to be called Autumn 1 Assessment, and it's everything here. I'm going to group. So it's created me a big old group. So let's go back and ungroup and try that again. So it's now disappears. I just want these ones here, and I just want these ones here. So if I close that down, it closes to there, closes to there, and closes to there. Cracking. So now if I want to just look at the Sims data, I can. And if I just want to look at the historical data plus their marks for this assessment, it goes there. I've got to be careful that this actually disappears as well, because it's hiding the whole column when I hide that section there. So I probably want to actually, if I'm going to use this, copy it into a new tab down here. This is also really good when it comes to things like meetings, that actually if you only want to present certain things, or you're showing students their grades and there is certain information that you want to hide, it's really easy to create like a particular view that gives you just the information that you need. So something that I have done a lot is when I've got a particular formula in something but I don't have the data already. So for example, I want to set up my spreadsheet and get it ready so that I can just plonk the formulas in and then it's gone. I've already planned the analysis that I want to do. But when I put this in here, like let's say I take this out, it's already ranking the student even though they've got no data. It's already adding it up. What I will do, I will add in an if formula. So if these cells here are blank, then just show a blank formula, don't do anything else. So I've already got a formula in this cell. So I'm going to add this if formula at the beginning, and I'm going to nest this old formula in there. So if is the formula that we're going to use, and it's a kind of logical test. So if, let's say this cell here, because if I add in marks, I'm going to add in marks for all the cells. So I'm going to say if this cell is blank, and to represent blank, we're using the quotes again, we just don't put anything in the middle, and it's saying, okay, if there's nothing in this cell, comma, so it's saying if that cell is blank, then I want you to be blank, comma. And then what this is value if false. So if actually it's not blank, it's got something in it, what do I want me to do? I want you to then do the formula that you were already doing. And the only other thing there is that because we need to have brackets around all the thinking that the formula is doing, I need to add a bracket on the end. Because I've added the if around the old one, the brackets need to go around it as well. Excel makes this really helpful in that it colors the brackets. So you can see that this red one here is actually relating to the rank command that it's doing, the rank formula, whereas this black one here is related to the if. So if I press enter, and it shows me nothing. And that's super helpful because that will automatically update. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, and you can copy above as well as below. So if I copy that, I'll start right down at the bottom, all the way to the top, and I'm going to recopy that all the way down to the bottom again. Let's just check if it has appeared. Lovely. So then that means if, oh, I've put this in the wrong place, this person actually wasn't there, it's actually another student. If I take that out, it's now given me a blank formula. And what I can do is I can change, I would just add that into all of my different columns. I only have to do it once for each column and then copy it down, and it will just keep things nice and neat. Because the other thing that you'll start to see sometimes is you'll get little error values or lots of hashes and things. And doesn't look very nice. Now, one of the most useful things that I find spreadsheets can do, and one of the things that I started using it for the most, was auto-assigning grades into my Marksheet. Because let's say your head of department has given you a list of what the grade boundaries are, and then you've got to go back through and manually put in, okay, that person got 12, okay, they get a grade 4. Okay, that person got 13, okay, they get a grade 5. It takes forever, particularly if you're doing it on a department-wide basis. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in this column here, and it's going to automatically fill the grades that we've got. So that's the count. This is actually going to be these are actually going to be the grade boundaries. And so each one was out of 12, so it's out of 60. So let's say that to get a grade 9, you needed 55, you needed 50 to get a grade 8, and let's just go in 5s and see how we go. 20, 15 to get a 1. So anything below that, we give them a U. We're going to use a formula called lookup. So I'm going into Adam Yates at the top again. I'm just going to press tab there once I've got the right thing. What am I looking up? Obviously here, it's related to the score that they scored in the test. So I'm looking up his total score, and then I'm going to look it up in a particular table. So I'm going to try and find that score in the grade boundaries. And I want to then, based on the grade boundaries, pick from the grades. So I've got those two things marked in. That's all I have to put in, and it should automatically assign. Now, this is a common problem where he's got 41, but it's giving me a 1. And that's because these grades actually need to be in ascending order in the table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort them from smallest to largest. And it's now given me a 6. So he got 41, so he gets a grade 6. If we change this score, and I'll go back and undo this in a second, to 26, it should give him a grade 3. Lovely. Marvelous. So let's just copy that formula back in so it doesn't go wrong. Fantastic. And now what we can do is we can copy it all the way down. Lovely. So this is the sort of thing that I'd now be adding in an if statement at the front to make sure that if I don't have enough data, I don't have what I need, then it's going to give me an NA. Actually, I think the reason it's giving me NA there is because I don't have anything if it's less than 15. Just insert a row above and make this 0. Cool. So now I've got a grade 0 as well. I can actually make that a U. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so it's giving him a grade U because he doesn't have anything. I'm going to give it a grade 0, and the reason I'm going to do that is just because if I've got to do any kind of calculations, averages, I want it to calculate with 0, not with U. Now we've got our like nice distribution. It's recalculated the grades from based on what I've just put in, my grade boundaries that I just made up, and I'm looking at the whole year group and I'm thinking, okay, if I use these grade boundaries, let's see if it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bar chart just to make that nice and easy. And actually, that's a pretty good curve. And if I know that scoring 25 and less is worth a 3, then yeah, that's absolutely where I want to keep it. If actually thinking about what it takes to get 23, that actually is kind of grade 4 work, then I can change it in here and it will then automatically update both the chart so I can see and the count in here. And it will update all of the grades up here as well. And obviously for lots of us actually, if you are at the stage now where the 2017 specs are giving you grade boundaries that are reliable enough and you know you can produce an assessment that's very similar to that, then you can have a look at what your distribution would be like if the kids sat the assessment that day. So now that we've made everything look very pretty, now it's time to move on to creating our dashboard. This is going to do a little bit more. It's going to do a lot more. But the point of it is that once we've set it up, it's something that you plug in more data and it's very quick to get it to update. And it's very adaptive and flexible, and it tells you a great level of detail. So what I'm going to do is go through each chart one by one. If you're only interested in some of the charts, feel free to just check those out. First one I'm going to start with is this bar chart here. So what we're looking at is the yellow bars are how many students are targeted for that grade, and the darker bars are how many students actually got that grade in our autumn assessment. So the first thing I need to do is create myself a pivot table. I need to click somewhere in my table, insert pivot table, and I'm going to make that in a new worksheet. So just put it down a new tab here, and I'm going to name that just so I know what this is. FFT versus autumn 1. I click inside this area, and I'm going to put their target grades in the row, and I'm going to put their grades that they got in autumn 1 in the column, and I'm going to count the students. So to do that, I put the full name column, just column that includes all of the students and doesn't differentiate anything else. I need this to be a pivot table because I can insert what they call slicers, and I'm going to set this slicer to year 11 sets, so the classes, and this box appears, which you will have seen in the dashboard, and this now allows me to click on a class, and it's just restricting it it to the students who are in that class, or in multiple classes, or in the whole thing. Problem is that as I change this table changes size. Sometimes there are no students who are predicted a 2. So if I build my chart based on these particular cells here, it's going to move and then it's going to be using an empty cell. So I need to create something that is going to be a little bit more stationary. I'm going to create a count of the autumn 1 actual grades and a count of the target grades. It won't move, and as this moves, it will adapt to it. So their grades are 9. And I am going to include you here, and I'm not actually doing any calculating with it. I'm going to have an FFT row, and I'm going to have an autumn 1 row. What I do is I press equals, and I refer to, in fact, let's do this in ascending order. And I refer to the box. So these are the FFT grades. I don't have any U's at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with the 2's, and I'm going to click here. Now this is an absolute reference. It will adapt based on whether the pivot table changes. So if I hit return, it's going to show me 6. And if I do the same thing for 3 here, if you have a look inside the formula, what's changing is it's at 2 and then 3, and it's showing me, this means it's looking at the grand total of the 3 row, of the 2 row. So the next one's going to be the 4 row. Unfortunately, there's not really a fast way of doing that. And I'm going to back update it here. I don't have rows to click in, but I'm going to change this to 1 and this to 0, just so that if they do appear, it will pick those up. And I'm going to do the same thing for autumn 1, but this time I'm going to use these ones along here. And then that's it. So now I can select my data, I can insert bar charts, and it's giving me my chart. So here, the blues are our FFT grade, and our oranges are the grades that we actually got. And as I change here, you can see that the chart starts to adapt as well, and the table starts to adapt. Okay, so we're going to leave that there. There are things that are not right about this, but we'll change all that later. The next thing I'm going to look at are these speed dials here. I'm going to look at the progress one first of all. So the progress value here is a simplified version of the government's Progress 8 measure. So a value of 0 means that every student got their target grades. Value of 1 or -1 means that all students on average were either 1 grade above or 1 grade below their target respectively. So this here is actually a type of pie chart. Excel calls it a donut. And the first thing that I need to do is I need to create average grade for the FFT grade and an average grade for autumn 1 grades, and then take them away and see on average where everyone was. Again, we need to base our data on a pivot table to make it nice and reactive. But actually what we're going to do is we're going to base it on the one that we just made. Find the mean average. What we need to do is we need to find, if we added everyone's grades together, so one person got 4 and one person got 6, together they've got 10, someone else has got 5, they get 15, we have to add all of those up and then divide by the number of grades that there are. So I need to create myself a new table, and I've got 6 students in here, they got 2. So if I add all those grades together, I've got 6 times 2, their grades all together would add 12, and I'm going to do that with everyone in the FFTD column. And I'm going to do everyone in the autumn 1 column. And now what I need to do is I need to add up all of these numbers together and divide them by the count of the number of students that are in this table. I'm going to use a formula called SUMIF, because if I just sum these, I'm going to get an error because I've got these errors at the top here. So if I use SUMIF, first thing is just the range, but then I have to set a criteria, and I want to set the criteria that if they are greater than 0. And I put quotes around that because it's going to say, okay, look in here, look at the ones that are greater than 0, and then only use those ones. And I'm going to just copy that one over here. Okay. And I need to make sure that that is being divided by the sum of all the students who are currently in the pivot table. Now we can find the progress score by subtracting one from the other. So currently, our whole of our year 11 have got a progress score of -0.28. So they're below target on average by about a quarter of a grade. To lay this out in our donut, we need to create another little table. If you think about what our donut looks like, we want it to be red, this little segment, if progress is negative, and we want it to be blue if progress is positive. So we have autumn 1, FAE, we have the average grade. A positive value is going to go in here, a negative value, if we have one, is going to go in here. And I only want one of them to be visible at a time. So I'm going to say, if this is less than this, then just be blank. Otherwise, do this subtracting this. So blank, because we'd have a negative progress score. But for this one, I want it to be a positive value, even though it's a negative score. So it's still going to be, if this is less than this, then do nothing. Otherwise, do this, subtract this. Great. The problem we've got here now is that if we insert insert our donut. It's filling out the whole donut. The whole donut is the value of all the values here put together, and we've only got one value. So we need to get something to fill out the rest of it so that only 0.2728 is actually filled in. I like to call this the rest column. What we're going to do is we're going to do 1 subtracting the sum of these two, and we're going to recreate our donut using these values here. And you can see now that actually only 28% of it has been filled in. And what I'll do later on in the dashboard is just make sure that the rest is actually a see-through bar. And the last thing that I need to do, this is my progress score down here. I'm going to put this to 2 decimal places because I'm going to display this. What you can do in Excel is you can insert shape, and then if the outside is selected and you say equals this cell, it will show you the value of this cell. And as I change this, the value inside that cell changes. That tells that progress is minus 0.28, and we'll copy that in later and get rid of some of these other bits. The next thing I'm going to show you is these two donuts down here. So the percentage of students that are on target and the percentage of students that are above target. We'll then very quickly go on to this chart here. You can see in each class the percentage of students that are on or above target. So what I've done in my Marksheet is I've created this column here, and it states whether students are above, below, or on target, and that's really important for what we're about to do. The formula works as 3 if statements, and I'm basically saying if this number here, which is how many grades they are above or below their target, is less than 0, then say that they are below. And if that's not true, then have a look at this if statement. If it is equal to 0, then say on. If not, test this if statement. If it is greater than 0, then say that they are above target. And if not, if none of those things work, then just go blank. And I'll spot that and have a look at what's going wrong, because I've obviously done something wrong. I need to make sure that I've got the right number of brackets at the end. Great, so that's not working. That's exactly what I needed. Right, so what I did was one of my less than or greater than signs the wrong way around. So now that's corrected. I can go back through and it's all in order. On, above, below, great. And I've copied that right down to the bottom as well. Now I've got that, I'm going to insert a new pivot table in a new worksheet, and I'm going to call this versus target, so I remember what it is. And I need to create one with the classes in the rows and the target description, I think is that one there, yeah, in the columns, and then we're going to count the student there. But what I'm going to do is I want it as a percentage, so I'm going to show values as a percentage of row total, because what this does is it tells me this is 11x2, the percentage of students in 11x2 who are above, below, or on target, and that overall will add up to 100%. And it's these bits at the bottom that I'm interested in. Now, this is an adaptive table, so actually if I use my slicer to limit it to just 11x1, we'll then move around. So I need to make sure that I create myself another little table just to pull out the data that I need. So I'm looking at the number of students above, on, and below, and I'm looking at this here, this here. So these are the number of students in the table who are, or the percentage of students that are above, on, or below target. And I need to create a new table that will allow me to create that donut. So I've got the students who are at least on target, and it's this one, the students who are on target and the students who are above target. And then I need something that's going to fill out the rest of the donut. So that's going to be 1 minus that. If I create myself a little donut here, nice. So that's the 77% of students who are on target. And then I want the students who are above, but I'm going to put it over here, and that's just these ones. And again, that's 1 minus that. Yep. And I'm going to insert new chart. And so again, this bit here is showing me the 34% of students who are above target. And then if I want to create my chart like this, I want to make sure that first of all, yes, I've got above, below, on. Just want to move it. So I really want that below column on the right hand side, because that's the one that is going to become clear later on. And I insert a bar chart like this, and I want to make it 100% one, like a stacked bar 100%. What it's doing is it's filling out from the left, and if I turn this into no fill, what it's doing is it's showing me the above guys first and then the on guys. So actually, if you want to just quickly look at how much of the class is on target overall, including the guys who are above, you can then just take a goose down that that way. So again, some formatting things that I want to change. I want to get rid of these 2 boxes. Don't want these all to be to two decimal places. I don't want 120% on there, and I don't want this column 2 bit there, but we'll get rid of that later. And that's those charts done. So then next thing we're going to do is look at these guys here, and all these is pivot tables. So if I go into my Marksheet and I insert a new pivot table, again I'm going to take it somewhere new, and what I can do is if I have their names as the rows, but this time I want their scores, so it's adding up their score, so it's adding up everything that's in the score column, because Adam Yates has 41 in his score column. It's just giving me that. Looks more complicated than it is, but in here I can then choose it to filter to only the top 10 values. I'm actually going to choose the top 5 based on the sum of the total score, and I hit OK, and it gives me the top 5 straight away. It's not ordered them for me in the way that I want, so I'm going to go into sort options. So I'm going to put them in descending order. So every time I change this chart to look at just a class, it will give me the top students, the top 5 students. I'm now going to do the same thing for the bottom, but I'm going to choose the bottom 5. I'm going to pick the ones who are rising up the most, so the ones whose their versus their previous grade is the highest value. So they've gone up the most grade since the last assessment, and the ones who, you know, like Ryan here, who his grades have massively slipped down. I want to catch those kids. This time, I'm going to put it into an existing worksheet. I'm going to choose where that goes, and I'm going to keep these guys all together. And I just change this here to bottom instead. So I've got this problem with these guys, that it's also including the zeros because perhaps these students haven't actually sat the test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a filter. Total score goes into filter. And what this allows me to do is to pick the total scores that I do and don't want in here. If I go in and I make sure that select multiple items is in there, and I'm going to unclick 0, and then it goes. So now we've only just got the bottom 5 with no zeros. Now the guys who are rising. This time I'm going to put versus their previous grade. And I need to change this to sum because it's counting whether they've got something in that column. And now the students who are falling. So small problem, not too much of a problem, that we've got more than 5 in each one. So we've got to think about giving ourselves a bit of leeway when we lay it out on the page, because when we list the top 5, the students in that sort of 5th place, there's more than one student with that value. So it's including all of them. To create these charts here, where we're looking at the gaps in pupil premium, send, and between male and female students, I need to create another set of pivot tables. Going to make sure I remember to name it this time. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pupil premium values in the rows. It's created me a unique list. So in that column we've either got Y, that student is pupil premium, or blank, that there's nothing in there, so they're not pupil premium. In the right hand column I'm going to do their progress versus their target, and I'm going to, instead of sum, I'm going to make it the average. So on average, pupil premium students are -1 below their grade, and on average non-pupil premium are -0.3 below their grade. A new chart so that I can create my chart from this, and it's going to be the students who are yes, the students who are, these are going to be pupil premium students. I'm just going to call them PP, and non-PP, I'm just going to call them non. So this is the value here, and this is the value here, and the difference is going to be pupil premium take away the non-pupil premium. The pupil premium students are actually doing 0.16 better in terms of their target, and I'm just going to change that. So again, it's only giving it me to 2 decimal places. This is where they are versus their target, and I'm going to put that into a bar chart. So this looks slightly different to what I've got in the original dashboard, because I've realized that actually these work out the average grade. It doesn't really help to work out the average grade because you don't know the makeup of those 2 groups. What you want to know is, student comes in with a certain ability indicated by their FFT grade. How do they perform in relation to that grade? Does our teaching make them perform better? And if you're pupil premium, are you affected by that? So actually here, it's saying that the random sample that I've created, students are actually below their target at the moment. I'm going to just change this to make it nice and easy, and I'm going to say that the minimum it's going to go down to is -1, and the maximum it's going to go up to is 1, -0.5 and 0.5, just to make it a bit clearer. So now it makes it nice and clear that yes, they're both going down, but the non-pupil premium students are going down more, and I need to here, the labels are going to be these two here. The labels are going to be people premium and non-people premium. This is going to be here. I'm going to add some data labels just so it's really clear that this is a value of minus 0.29 and minus 0.13. So then if I want to show the gap measurement, so this bit here at the top, so it's saying that pupil premium students are 1.5 higher. And actually, to make that clearer that it's in the pupil premium students' favor, I should really have this column over on this side. So let's make sure that that's what we got. Yeah. And what I need to do is it's going to be another stack bar chart. I need to have pupil premium, the rest, and the non-pupil premium. This is, and we're going to use our if value again, so only the pupil premium or the non-pupil premium is going to output, and it's going to be the gap. So if it's in the pupil premium's favor, it's going to appear here, and if it's in the non-pupil premium's favor, it's going to appear here. So if this is greater than this, then take away this, otherwise do nothing. Great. So we said it's 0.16 above. However, if this is greater than this, then do this, take away this, otherwise do nothing. Okay, so that's outputting as blank. And just to check, if I make that bigger, if I make that 0.2 for example, then the chart is updating, but that's updating there, and the pupil premium has disappeared, and the rest is going to be equal to this plus this. Let's say 1 take away that. Okay, so equals, I'm going to use max, so the biggest value of those two, it's going to subtract from 1. Lovely. And so now, if I create myself a bar chart, switch the rows and columns, okay, and what I'd need to do is, let's say our pupil premium students are coloured in a light blue here. Our non-pupil premium students are coloured in a dark blue here. I would make this little bar here the same colour as the pupil premium students. The rest I'm going to fill in blank and just say for a second, where's that getting that from? The non-pupil premium. Okay, let's just say that it was 0.2. This we're going to change to dark blue just in case and change that back. Okay. Now, for the send students and for the male versus female, it works in exactly the same way. The only difference is when we go into creating a pivot table for our send student and we put them in here, you can see that we've got E and K. So once we start to count their previous grades, in order to create an average of both of these, we have to do what we did with the first FFT versus autumn grade. So let's count the number of students in each one. And what we do is this times this, this times this, and then we add those two together and we divide by the sum of these two. So the average grade for a send student is actually 0.36, and that will keep that there and that will adapt. So let's say this is the average of the send students and this is the average of the non-send students, and then we just work out the rest exactly as we did before. Realise that it's not actually their average grade, it's versus their previous grade. Realise I don't actually want versus their previous grade, I want actually versus their target grade. So the last thing I need to show you is this bit down the bottom here. This one is relatively simple. Into the Marksheet, create ourselves a pivot table, new worksheet, and let's just call this topic breakdown. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the classes on the columns, and then we're going to put the sections. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the average of each one. So this is the average score that the students in that class got for that part of the test. And now I want to create myself a little table underneath. So I've got number, and this is the average score. And I'm taking the average of all the averages in here. And I want that to 2 decimal places, let's say. No, let's just do to 1. Now I did a sideways bar chart like this because that was the amount of space that I had in the dashboard that I was creating. It doesn't really matter which way around you do it, makes no difference. I am going to add in the data labels, and I am going to change the axis to out of 12 as its maximum, because that's how many marks were in the exam. And I suppose we're looking at the whole cohort, aren't we? If you looked at one particular class, you'd be looking for somewhere where it was much lower. That's the kind of thing that then you'd be focusing on in your intervention afterwards. So now it's about copying everything into the same worksheet. So I'm going to call this dashboard, put it right at the beginning, and I'm going to color it so it's nice and clear for me. I'm going to take my slicer, which is going to become very important in a second, and I'm going to cut these things and paste them. Make sure I get the text boxes that I've created as well. Appear to have lost the numbers for the boxes that go in here, so we'll have to fill this in later. So I need to make sure I'm doing this. I also don't like this filter bit here, so I'm going to try and get rid of that. Obviously it looks a bit of a mess, but let's get it working first, and then we will make sure it's all in the right place. So when I click my slicer here, it's good at changing these two because those are the ones that I created it based on this pivot table here. It's not working on all of them, but there's a very quick fix for that. So if I right click inside the slicer and I click report connections, it's giving me a list of all my pivot tables and where they are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the pivot tables here because we created a number of them, and every single one of them we created for this dashboard, so I know that they're all relevant. And when I click OK, so it's now linking them all up, and so when I click on a particular class, you can see them all start to change. For me, that's the most exciting part of this whole thing. So the final few little things before I tidy things up, in my pivot tables, I want to go into pivot table options and unclick auto fit columns width on update. This will mean that if you pick a particular size that fits in, when it updates, if the names are slightly too long, it won't shift things and therefore shift all your charts out of the way. Your pivot tables won't automatically update. So when you start adding in extra data into here, your pivot tables won't change. Now, there is a way of making them do that automatically using macros, but macros are disabled in Excel at school, so we can't do that. There is a slow way where you can right click and you can click refresh on each of your pivot tables, but again, that's quite slow. I find the fastest way is just to save, close, reopen anytime you make an update to the data, which actually is probably not going to be too often. If you want to turn this then into something that you can print out, you want it to be just on one page, don't you? So I've gone into view and I've gone into page layout so I can see what it looks like when I print it. Page layout, I'm going to change to landscape, although it doesn't really matter. Narrow gives you as much space on the page as you possibly can. After I've arranged them, I will set a print area. So I highlight a particular area and I click set print area, and then that means I'm highlighting everything if I can't squeeze it all onto one page. Then when I go into print, if I pick in the scaling bit down here and I say fit sheet on one page, it will shrink absolutely everything so that it all features on one page. Now you might look at it and here it's too small, so I definitely want to go in and adapt things to make that go down a little bit further to create more space, or just print it on a really big bit of paper. Either you can shift things around and use this, or you can start to resize rows and think about where things go. So I'm going to now try and tidy this up as much as possible, and I'll set it to fast speed and stop if there's anything interesting I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do here is add in another slicer so that if their autumn 1 score, and then I'm going to take out this filter, and it's going to stay like that, but I'm going to take and just move it out of the way over here. Is that still working? Yeah, and is this still working? Yeah. And I can also take off this grand total row. And that's it really. So I think I could definitely think around with this a little bit more. I'm frustrated that this right hand side of the page is empty and I want to fit that in a little bit more. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found something that was useful in all of this, and if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Cheers.